Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday's class on experiencing the Buddha's teaching. And we are at the last module of this series, which is on calm abiding and special insight. So the last 2 weeks, I have covered the topic of calm abiding, which is related to the 6 perfections or 6 parameters, the 6 practices that we engage in as a means to achieve enlightenment. Good evening, Craig. So feel free to write your comments or questions on the live chat if you have any. So we talk about calm abiding, which is a type of concentration, mind or concentration or meditative absorption. And this calm abiding will be related to the parameter of concentration. The word parameter I have explained previously as a Sanskrit word, usually translated as perfection, a perfection of concentration. And today we're going to look at perfection of wisdom, the last of the 6 perfections or 6 parameters. I quite like the word parameters, especially when we explain it to mean that which help us to go beyond our current limitation and help us go beyond our current suffering, states of suffering, states of still very much entrapped within the various causes and conditions of suffering, to arrive at what in Buddhism we call the other shore of peace, of freedom, of liberation from suffering and causes of suffering. So this idea of parameter of gone beyond or going beyond, that which help us to go beyond our where we are, the current limitations, to arrive at a place of happiness and peace. I like that connotation, and with this meaning in mind, and applying this meaning to the 6 qualities we cultivate: generosity, ethical discipline, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. It really sort of highlights to us that we need to cultivate these qualities, manifest them in our daily life in order for us, and they support us. When they come together, they enable us to go beyond, to step out of our current limitation, to step out of the influence or the impact of our old habits and conditionings, almost as if we help us to break free from all this so that we can arrive at the nicer place, a nicer state, the so-called the other shore, which is another term for nirvana or enlightenment. And by keeping that meaning in mind, it really sort of clarified, when we cultivate these various qualities, what we're supposed to do, how are they supposed to function, where are they supposed to lead us towards. Whereas the term perfection for me sometimes imply setting a ridiculous high standards for oneself. And of course, we're not going to live up to those high standard expectations. And so we find very discouraging. We find ourselves disappointed in ourselves, in our own progress. And also we have the tendency to project our own idea of perfection onto others, especially our spiritual teachers. And we say that, well, if they're perfect patience, they should behave like this, the perfect moral discipline or perfect generosity. So the word perfection or perfect has a lot of very strong connotation. In fact, these days we talk about perfectionism. People who find usually compelled based on various causes and conditions, to always strive to be perfect. And with this connotation, I find that it's not always the recipe for genuine happiness and peace. So therefore, I much prefer to translate these 6 qualities as parameters. Parameters are that which take us beyond our limitation, beyond our current suffering state, and to help us arrive at a place of peace and genuine happiness. So we have looked at how to cultivate calm abiding, how to cultivate the parameter of concentration, which has a supporting role. It sort of supports us in developing what we're talking about, penetrative insights, develop insights into reality, developing wisdom, and also help to stabilize that insight and wisdom so that it really has a transformative effect on us, transform our views, our beliefs, and filter upwards, and therefore transform also our behavior, our choices. Yeah. And among the 6 of them, you can say from one point of view, the most important, the one that really make a big difference to our spiritual practice is the cultivation of wisdom. And this is especially true in Buddhism, in the Buddhist tradition, the different Buddhist traditions. You'll find that wisdom or insight has a special place. There's great emphasis placed on it. This is related very much to how the Buddha analyzed our current situation. The Buddha analyzed the very root source of our suffering. Of our problem is identified as ignorance. Ignorance in this context means not just not knowing the truth or not knowing reality, which is the case, but on top of it, we misrepresent reality. We have a distorted view of reality. So not only do we not know reality as it is, but we are functioning and we're operating from a place of misunderstanding. We have some mistaken notion and we project that onto our experiences and we function from that. And so we are sort of doubly wrong, so to speak. And this is, according to the Buddha, this is the root source of our suffering, our continuous suffering, in what we call samsara, still this cyclic existence. So precisely because the root source is ignorance, is a misunderstanding of reality, a distorted understanding of reality. Therefore, the opposite of it is wisdom, which means a clear, accurate understanding and seeing into reality as it is. So, and precisely because of this, wisdom has a special place or exalted place in the Buddhist teaching. And we're going to take a look at this wisdom and how it becomes a paramita, how does it facilitate us going beyond our limitations, the various causes and conditions of suffering that we still have, how we go beyond that, and how it helps us to arrive at a place of nirvana or enlightenment, a place of peace and genuine happiness. Yeah. There are different types of wisdom. I mean, even in our secular life, we sometimes say certain people are wise. So we are wise in different ways, in different domain, different subject matter. In this context, I'm going to look at wisdom in a more narrow sense. So here, wisdom or paramita wisdom, we're just going to highlight the wisdom that knows we can call ultimate reality, or just say knows reality as it is. So it's a particular kind of wisdom, and wisdom is often associated with insight in Buddhism. So it's almost like insight, as the name implies, we see into something. We able to have clear sight of reality. So it is true insight that so insight and wisdom, almost synonymous. It is true developing such penetrative insights that we grow wise. We come to know what is real, what is reality. Hence, the two terms can be used kind of interchangeably, special insight and wisdom. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly is the contents of this special insight or such wisdoms. I usually explain special insight as a profound shift in our perspective, in the way we see things. So at the moment, I'm maybe without insight, I see the world, I see the happenings around me, or how I see myself, or see my body, my own behavior, and so on and so forth. I see it from a certain perspective. I have a certain point of view, and this point of view dictate how things appear to me, and how I understand them, how I relate to them, and how I react to them. Right? And so special insight is what happened is when we develop insight, is there is a shift in our perspective. Previously, we see things through this angle, and now we gain an additional angle. We have an additional perspective. We can see the same events, the same happenings from a different perspective. So in Zen, there's this saying, at the beginning of your spiritual practice, mountain is mountain, water is water, or river is river, or water is water. And in the midst of our practice, mountain is not mountain, and water is not water. And at the end of our practice, when we gain realization, mountain is once again mountain, and water is once again water, which is kind of a funny, I quite like it. So at first, at the beginning of our practice, or even before we practice, we take things for granted. How things appear to us is, of course, is how they are. A good person is a good person, a bad person is a bad person. A happy event is a happy event, unhappy event. The world seems much simpler, quite simplistic, right? Because we never question the appearances, we never question our instinctive judgments or evaluation of the situation. We just take it all as face value, so to speak. We accept them, we assent to them as how they appear to us. So mountain is mountain and water is water. What's so difficult about it? Then we started our spiritual search, our spiritual practice. We start to inquire into it. We pay closer attention to it. And we arrive at a state in the midst of it where mountain is not just mountain. Water is not just water. Things get complicated. Our original simplistic view is now complicated by our practice. We start to get a sense, inkling that, hey, something must maybe not right. The so-called good person, precisely because I'm willing to pay mindful attention to it, it's not that good. It doesn't always live up to the image I have in my mind, my expectations, my projection, so to speak. There are many occasions where they sort of clash with it, or they just don't fit harmoniously with my idea of a good person. So I'm not so sure whether the good person is really a good person. And the bad person also, in the past I can just ignore them because I already stuffed them into the pigeonhole. I don't need to think about it. And now, because of practice, I pay closer attention to this person. I reflect a little bit. Hey, this person is not so dissimilar to me. Just now in the previous meditation session, I talk about thinking how this person, and that all of us share the commonality, that we have this innate wish to be happy and to not suffer. And this wish, of course, motivates our behavior, our choices, our actions. So even for someone that I might, in the past, I might have written them off as a bad person, evil one, whatever it is. In the light of that, if I were to reflect on that reason and apply it to this person, I have to say that, well, I actually can empathize with this person to some extent. I can see that, hey, even though I may not agree with this person's choices or behavior, I may not agree with this person's definition of what is happiness and what is suffering, I nonetheless can still see, from this point of view, in the light of this reasoning, why this person might be doing this. This person, because they define happiness in that way, and therefore they behave in that way, they choose this particular method to secure their happiness, and hence they are who they are. Yeah. So it's not as if the person is so incomprehensible to me. I can somehow relate to this person on just that one point, even though I disagree with the others. Yeah. And so that also complicates us, isn't it? We actually might start to feel a sense of compassion for our so-called enemy or the bad person. And our reality becomes a little bit no longer so clear-cut, black and white. There's all these different shades of gray. Hence, mountain is not mountain and water is not water. And then when we finally, through practice, have a breakthrough, means we break out of the frame of our old perspective, and now we have an additional and yet another perspective that allow us to see the people, the happenings from a different point of view. We have somehow expand And in Buddhism, of course, if this insight is accurate, then we say to have a much clearer understanding, a clearer view of reality as it is, in opposition to the previous old perspective, which might be distorting, has certain distorting elements in it, and we are not really seeing things clearly. And when we have such a breakthrough, when we experience this profound shift in perspective, then everything seems to fall back in place. In the light of that new perspective, the more penetrative insight, then once again we see things as they are. And mountain is mountain, and water is water, and we let go of a lot of our projections and unrealistic expectations, and we can see this person as good, and yet in this new perspective, this person is no longer viewed through our old lenses and our old projection and or more unrealistic expectation of what a good person is. In our newfound perspective, a good person is a more complicated kind of thing. A good person can embody good qualities and yet at the same time not be free from less wholesome qualities. In fact, we are able to appreciate them for who they are, precisely where they are, with these mixtures of wholesome and unwholesome qualities. So on one hand, it's a more complicated view. On the other hand, because you see so much clearer than in the past, and because you are able to step out of the old framework, old conditioning. So, and this clarity, makes things so much easier for you to relate to. You are not looking at them from the same perspective anymore. But in this new perspective, things make so much better sense to you. So that's why mountains once again mountain, and water is once again water. But this mountain and that previous mountain are not the same. They're the same thing, but they're not viewed the same way. Right? So insight is this shift, this profound shift that we try to catalyze. They go from the old frame to a new frame. Right? And in the midst of that, a lot of other things change. Things that are dependent on the old perspective, old framework, they fall apart. Because when we function from the new framework, we no longer react in that way. Things don't appear to us in the same way, and we stop reacting to them. We stop thinking about them in the same old way. We have a different set of feelings are invoked, and therefore a completely different set of responses come forth from us. Yeah? And that is what we are aiming to do. We are aiming to create the conditions to catalyze this shift, to bring on this new perspective, that allow us to see things clearer, that allow us to ideally see reality as it is. So that is just a very a brief explanation of what we are aiming to do, in special insight or wisdom in this context. Yeah. Chief among the realization of such special insight or wisdom will be what in Buddhism called the realization of selflessness or emptiness. And I will try to explain a bit on this over the next few sessions, and also offer a few different methods that within the Buddhist traditions we employ to help us bring about this shift in perspective, this development of special insight. The word insight, the word sight, right? So it has something to do with seeing. And just to point out a few characteristics of this shift in perspective is that it's not just an intellectual thing. It's not something about thinking differently. You are able to reason and you come up with a different intellectual view or philosophical view about things. Of course, it's related to that, but it's something much more, how should I say, not really intuitive, but it actually impacts the way we see, literally. We see, we hear, we smell, we taste, we sense, and of course we think. Yeah, it impact our senses as well. So it's much more experiential, not just conceptual. So it must go beyond conceptual, and it's something that we actually experience directly. That's what insight implies. Okay, so it's not just a change in concepts, a change in conceptual understanding, which are maybe not so difficult to accomplish, but that is not the special insight we're working towards. Special insight involve a change, a shift in our direct experience of things. So quite often we will find some people more so than others, we can get very entangled in the words and concepts of Buddhism. There are tons of books on this special insight that talk about the philosophical view behind, which is very helpful to at least help to have a kind of a preliminary grasp of what it is, which is, for some people are more essential than others. For me, that is very important. I like to wrap my head around to get some idea, even though the ideas themselves are not the insight, but the ideas clarify things, and I feel much better if I have some idea how to proceed. Right? But the ideas themselves are not the insight. The insight is a direct experience, a direct seeing into reality. And so we must not confuse the two, because so it's much easier, of course, to work around concepts and words. So we can find we may replace insight with just more words, just words and words and words, all the correct answers to all the questions, the philosophical questions. So we know how to answer them. We might be able to come up with various concepts to explain things. But that is not insight, right? There's a conceptual understanding, can be very helpful for some people, maybe unnecessary for others. We are all different, so we approach things differently. But at no point should we confuse a conceptual understanding with a special insight. So that's why I say it is what really happened is, for me at least, I think it's a profound shift in perspective. So one moment you directly experience things in this way, things appear to you in this way. When the breakthrough happens, the world literally looks different to you. So do you mean we have to live it? Oh yeah, we have to live it, of course. But don't worry, at the beginning it's unstable. You tend to forget about it. So you may have an earth-shaking experience, and then it impact you for a while. But old habits, they don't give up so easily. The old conditioning, the old perspective. And it's not uncommon for people to shift into a new perspective, and that may stay with us for a while. Some people for just a few seconds, and then you're back into old perspective. Others may stay for a day or a week or a month, sometimes up to, could be a year. For an entire year, you bathe in the sort of the light of that new perspective. But inevitably, for most people, we find that, especially when circumstances changes, we start to drift back to our old perspective. We lose sight of the insights that we have, which is why the journey continues from the first moment of gaining special insight. That is not the end of the journey. That is the beginning of the journey. And the rest of the journey is really about stabilizing the insight, allowing it to sink deeper, to have a more profound impact on all aspects of ourselves. It's also about how we learn to live from this new perspective. Whereas for years and decades, we have been living from the old perspective, which is very deeply rooted in us, and which is supported by powerful conditionings of old habits. If you ever try to break a habit, start things afresh, you may appreciate how hard it is sometimes. The old habits, they don't just give up easily. We find, especially when the going gets difficult, we get tired, we are stressed out, other things happen. It's very easy for us to have a relapse. We sort of slide back into the old ways. We start to see things we forgot. We can forget about the new perspective. Yeah. But nonetheless, what we aim for is not just an intellectual, conceptual understanding. We can be helped by that, having such intellectual and conceptual understanding. So it's a stepping stone, but we must go beyond it to have an actual direct experience, of literally this a new seeing. So this breakthrough, when it becomes something significant, this stage is, they give different name given to it in Buddhism. It's sometimes called the path of seeing, literally, because it's characterized by a seeing, almost like with new pairs of eyes, that's seeing. It's also called stream enterer in different Buddhist tradition. It's a stage of, it's called stream enterer because with this new seeing, you enter into a stream. You board the boat and on and off you go along this stream or this river that only flow to one destination, which is enlightenment. So yeah, on the fast track, the express lane to enlightenment. Now, once you pass through and you arrive at the path of seeing, so it's also therefore called stream enterer. You become a stream enterer. So this is a significant moment in the Buddhist journey. And let's look at how we can catalyze such a transformation. But first and foremost, let's look at what exactly we see, what we realize with this new perspective. And this is usually summarized with the terms like selflessness or emptiness. This is the content of the realization. Selflessness here means lacking, realizing that there isn't a particular kind of self. Self here refers to, for example, with myself. Out of the ignorance mind, I foolishly believe that there is a person, a self, with certain characteristics. We tend to hold this self to be permanent, doesn't change, unchanging. Or sometimes our mind is a bit trickier, play trick on us. Okay, the outside layer can change, but somewhere deep inside, it must be unchanged. There's an unchanging core to my sense of self. So either way, there's a quality of permanence. It is independent. It sort of can stand alone on its own, without dependent on other causes and conditions. So there's some aspect of it should stand apart from others. Stand self-sufficient, autonomous, all by itself, stand alone, so independent, permanent, independent. And the last one is a characteristic of being unitary, singular. Self is singular, me is singular. So it's just one single whole. And what about parts? So then we have this complicated relationship with the notion of parts. Well, it can have parts, and yet it is not only parts. It's almost like there is somehow, of course, it's self-contradictory. You will really analyze it, but nonetheless, the notion that we hold on to is illogical. But nonetheless, we have an irrational kind of fixation on this sense of self that we carry along with us, usually unconscious or subconscious. We don't naturally think like this, but deep down within us, that holding and that grasping, that view is very firmly established. That this self is permanent, doesn't change, it's independent, and it's somehow singular or unitary. It's sort of just one thing. And of course, the Buddha said this reality is completely opposite. It's not like that. We don't have such a self, and hence the teaching is called selflessness. We don't actually have such a self. And this grasping and holding onto such a notion of self is mistaken, right? And that is, and it's empty also of such a self. So the word selfless and empty, in this context, in my simplified presentation, you can regard them as synonymous. So selfless, it lack such a permanent, independent, unitary self. We talk about emptiness. You realize here, where I am, is completely empty of, devoid of such a kind of self, of being permanent, unchanging, independent, and singular. Yeah. It might seem very abstract. You thought, oh, I never really think of myself like this, which is true. Most people never think about ourselves like this, never consciously think of the self like this. But if we were to pay close attention, just beneath the usual way of thinking and worrying and planning and concerns and all our anger and attachment, somewhere deep within the midst of it, you will be able to uncover a notion of such a self here that we hold very tightly onto. And it's quite hidden, which makes it doubly difficult to discover. Our ignorance is very smart, and it's not going to fully expose itself to us, to allow us to scrutinize it closely and to refute it. No. So the ignorance is very sneaky. It sort of hide this sense of notion of self deep in and among all the other concerns and whatever it is and reactions. Yeah. But nonetheless, if we follow the Buddha's teaching and closely analyze it, we will uncover it, and we will come to see that, yes, most of the time we live under the influence of such an ignorance, that we do instinctively grasp onto such a sense of self. And this is true for everybody according to the Buddhist teaching, including Buddhists. In fact, Buddhists do precisely sometimes, because we talk so much about emptiness and selflessness, we may not realize it. Actually, Buddhists grasp onto such a self just as strongly as anybody else. Talk about rebirth, and you listen closely to the Buddhist description of rebirth and how people talk about it, you will find the ghost of a permanent, independent, unitary self, safe and sound within the Buddhist notion of rebirth. Even though doctrinally it's not supposed to be there, but in common speech and the thoughts and the aspiration of most Buddhists is there. One of the most classic example in Tibetan Buddhism is in relation to one's revered Lama, one's guru, who passed away. And in Buddhist tradition, in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there is a custom of searching for the reincarnation, the rebirth of the previous Lama, and then to recognize them formally, enthronement ceremony. And therefore, this young little chap, usually is boy, occasionally there's a girl, but usually is boy, will be viewed as the reincarnation of the previous Lama. And people would approach this little boy and say, oh, it's very not uncommon for people to say, Lama, do you recognize me? I'm so and so. So deep within our notion, that's what we want, right? In this case, the self is we project onto the self of the Lama. We are saying that the Lama that passed away, and this young boy that is recognized officially as the reincarnated Lama is the exact same person. So exactly the same, identical, that there should be no gaps in the memory whatsoever. So just as my late Lama recognized me, of course this young one should recognize me, isn't it? It's the same person, identical, unchanged, and not, of course, dependent in any way, affected in any way by the whole death and rebirth process, by the fact that they are born in a different family. They now, one is let's say one maybe was 70 years old, and this one is 1 year old, and therefore we have this it's very spontaneous notion of trying to hold on to, could be the case of one's revered teacher, could be a case of oneself. We hold on to this sense of immutable self, or an immortal self, you may even call it, because it's permanent, it doesn't change. It's not dependent on any conditions whatsoever. And this is the kind of self that we investigate and to uncover and to realize, oh, it's never been here. It's a non-existent. It's just a figment of our human imagination that we project onto ourselves, onto others. And that is one way of understanding special insight. And how do we go about realizing it? So today I want to present a method of meditation and investigation. More often you'll find this in Theravada tradition, or what sometimes we call vipassana meditation. Vipassana is the Pali word that they use for we translate as insight, special insight. In the Theravada tradition, there are of course many variations within which I don't know all of them. I know just a bit of it. The method used to facilitate the development of insight quite often rely on mindfulness. Mindfulness in this case is, you can understand as paying close attention and investigate with the help of such close attention, mindful attention, to investigate the characteristics of the different phenomena, the different experiences, and to uncover for ourselves with this close observation how false or how wrong some of my notions are. My notions, the ideas I hold on to, are shown through close observation under mindfulness to be not true. It's simply not true. They don't correspond to my actual direct experience, and therefore I have to let go of those notions. So of course the notion will include permanence, independence, and unitary. So in relation to the self, then we investigate such characteristics. So is such a thing permanent or impermanent? Do I observe change? If I observe change, it can't be unchanging. Is it independent or dependent? If I observe change, which is follow certain kind of pattern and certain dependence on certain conditions, then it cannot be independent. And if I observe it closely and it has parts, and I can never find that one thing, like Wai Chong should correspond to that one thing. Instead, the term Wai Chong correspond to a whole collection of all sorts of different bits and pieces, then it cannot be unitary. It has to be multiplicity. Because it's just the interaction of so many parts and processes. So what is the singular thing that the name Wai Chong refer to? Nothing singular here. It's just at any point of time, any moment if I look, all I can find are just the interactions, the dependency on multiple parts, multiple conditions, ever changing. So this would sort of put an end to holding on to a notion of a permanent, independent, unitary self. So the method used rely on mindfulness, close observation, paying close attention, and investigating such characteristics. So that is the first method I don't present. We will look at others in the coming session. Let's just explain a little bit how we go about applying this method in meditation, and then we can just meditate and give it a try. Yeah. Of course, we need to identify a certain domain of investigation. We need to proceed step by step. And most important is what we are aiming to do is to firmly convince ourselves that they cannot be such a permanent, independent, unitary self. We want to really shift our perspective, open up something new for ourselves. Classically, you investigate, this is the four close placement of mindfulness. Mindfulness, the body, really look at the body, close attention, and really discover for ourselves, hey, the body is not how, doesn't exist in the way that I project or I think about it. The body is impermanent. The body is totally dependent on various conditions. The body is, of course, not unitary. Yeah. So mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of form, traditionally also, yeah. Mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings. And this is true for feelings as well. Same characteristics of impermanence and so on. Mindfulness of the mind, investigate consciousness itself. Consciousness is something stable. Maybe consciousness can take the place of a self. Maybe I can just label Wai Chong on my consciousness, and that will work, and then I will be safe. I just have to preserve my consciousness, and then I can go from one life to another, and I will live forever and ever as Wai Chong. Yeah. Unfortunately, in fact, the Buddha said, if you want to hold on to, better to hold on to the body than consciousness, because consciousness is even more transient than the body. At least the body, it changes, but the rate of change, as far as we can observe for the body, is much slower. Whereas consciousness, our mind, it's always changing. It's far more transient. So mindfulness of the mind. And last is the mindfulness of phenomena, or something called mindfulness of Dharma. This have different interpretation, but you can, in the broadest interpretation is, if you apply mindfulness to anything at all, any impermanent thing, you will find the same characteristics: change, being conditional, not unitary. And therefore, nowhere in the universe can you find anything, definitely nothing in our own experience, where we can point to and say, oh, that's myself. That's the permanent, independent, unitary self, or soul. Sometimes people use the word soul, but I prefer not to use it because it can have other connotations. So I cannot point to anything at all in my experience where I can safely say, oh, well, look, that is the one that is permanent. That's the one that is going to go from one life to another. That is going to be me. And it's going to be independent, and I'll be safe. That's what I am able to hold on to. So it is through patience, mindful observations that we uncover the fundamental mistakes due to our own ignorance. And when we are finally convinced, we let go of that old perspective, and we have a breakthrough in our understanding. We have a breakthrough in the sense that the world literally appears to us differently, as far more fluid, in flux, as far more conditional and dependent on conditions, as made up of multiplicity or diversity, and how things all interact and interconnected. So it's almost like a vision will arise for us. And at that point, we would have a breakthrough in our understanding. We would have a new insight. So that is the theory. Let's do some practice together. And so let's practice mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of phenomena, and see how far we get. And in this practice, I will invite you to bring your attention, first of all, to the body. Notice the body. How does the body appear to us in our under the lenses of mindful awareness? Quite often in this context, the body appears in the form of changing bodily sensations, tension, relaxations, breath sensation, breathing in, breathing out. So the body in this context of the meditation is primarily tactile sensations. And so we observe that. And along the way, feelings arise. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, comfortable feeling, uncomfortable feeling. Let's take a good look at those feelings. And notice also that they are transient, they're impermanent, they're changing, they're dependent. And there are a great many different types of feelings. And hopefully we can get to the mind, and then we have some time to observe our consciousness, our mind, and to recognize from our own experience, our own observation. Hey, that's right, my mind, the mind is the consciousness, is first of all, it's conditional. One moment is, in the previous session, I have moments of intense sleepiness or drowsiness. So I'm not even sure what I was talking about just now. And so mind come under influence of different factors, and how consciousness are subjected to change and subjected to conditions. So of course, we wouldn't be able to accomplish it in one session, but by patiently, repeatedly observe and uncover for ourselves, we are slowly, bit by bit, changing our view. We stop believing in the old view, old perspective, and we start to entertain something different. So let's do a meditation together, and I'll guide you through it. So I invite you to settle yourself in a suitable meditation posture and join me on this sort of exploration of mindfulness, and for us to see for ourselves whether some of these ideas that I just presented, is there any truth to it? So please adopt a suitable meditation posture for your body. You can sit on a chair, sit on the floor, you can lie down on your back in the supine position in the privacy of your own place. And see if you can allow the spine, the back to assume a natural, comfortable position. Upright if you are sitting, straight if you are lying down. Take care that the posture, the meditation posture that you have adopted does not introduce additional unnecessary pain or discomfort into your own body. Good to rest the hands and arms on some kind of physical support so that you can relax and surrender their weight to that support. Feel free to close your eyes completely, or you can leave your eyes open, whichever works best for you. So as you settle your body into the posture, I'm going to ring the bell to sing at the start of our meditation. First and foremost, let's see if we can reassure our body that this posture that we have adopted is really one that is supportive of it. So see if we can let into our awareness, our mindful awareness, sensations coming through the points of contact between our body and our seat, our body and the ground. Highlight to ourselves sensations that we perceive as solidity, firmness, stability, qualities we associate with the earth element. And by notice such sensations coming through the touch points between body and seat, body and ground, we want to send a message to our body, to our brain, reassuring them that the body is well supported, well balanced, and safe in this posture. Given time, our body may respond by loosening up a bit, unwinding a bit. The body may realize that it does not need to be so tight and tense, that there is no danger here. And it can let go of some of those unnecessary contractions and tightenings in the different parts of the body. So that is what I call acquiring a seat for our body meditation. Having done so, we can practice mindfulness of body. We can start with mindfulness of body, which serve two functions here. First is, of course, to allow us to investigate the nature of the body, the nature of bodily sensations that come into awareness. And secondly is helps to settle the bodies, to further settle down the body and help the body to hopefully become more comfortable in the posture. So let's start at the crown. I invite you to allow different bodily sensations from different parts of the body to just appear to our awareness, to our mindful awareness. So much so that we just seem as if we start to notice sensations from that part of the body. Maybe a little bit of tingling sensation at the crown, a slight feeling of pressure or itching, could be warm, could be coolness, maybe nothing at all, no sensation whatsoever. So without struggle, without forcing, just be aware. Moving on from the crown, let's become aware of sensations at the face, our own face. See if you notice whether are you unconsciously tensing or tightening certain muscles of the face. Could be the muscles of the forehead, or those muscles around the eyes. Or it could be clenching our jaw, tightening the muscles of the jaw. And as we become aware of sensation of the face, sometimes we can persuade those muscles to not be so tight and tense, to relax, and to let in a different feeling, a feeling of softness, of ease and comfort into the face. Moving on down to the throat, the neck and shoulders, we allow sensations from this part of the body to come into awareness. Neck and shoulders are places that we tend to store quite a bit of tension and tightness, our reactions to stressful situations in life. So we do notice area of tension and discomfort. See if we can simply acknowledge them for the moment, for the time being. And let's continue allowing sensations from both arms to come into awareness now. So much so that we notice the subtle sensations along both arms, from the shoulder joint down to the elbows, the wrists, into the hands, noticing all these changing sensations, bodily sensations. And although sensations appear in a fairly coarse manner, we can already, if we are careful, notice changes. That those sensations do not stay the same. One moment we do not notice sensations, next moment they arise, only to change and maybe fade away a bit later. Now that we are aware of some of the sensations in both arms and hands, see if we can give permission and just imagine resting the weight of both arms on their support. Just allow them to rest here. Next, we allow sensations from the chest to come into awareness. At the chest, we may sense the movements of the breathing, expanding and contracting. We may sense other tensions or sensations at the front of the chest, at the back of the chest, at the sides. Allowing all these different bodily sensations to come into mindful awareness. As we take note of them, see if we can also take note of their changing nature. They've been impermanent sensations. Next, we can allow sensations from the abdomen to come into awareness. Sensations from the skin, the muscles, deep within the abdomen, from the various organs, maybe. So as we sensitize our mind, our mindful awareness, welcome in the different sensations from the different parts of the body. Occasionally we notice sensations at areas that we have already passed through. They do not stay the same. They shift, they change. They may become tighter and tenser, or they may relax and feel so much at ease, more relaxed and comfortable. Moving on from the abdomen, become aware of sensations at the pelvis, the pelvic region. Coming back here now, allow sensations from both legs to come into mindful awareness, starting from the hip joints, moving at our own pace, letting into mindful awareness sensations along both legs, down to the knees, to the ankles, all the way to the feet. And now that we have awakened the sensations in both legs, see if we can give permission and just consciously allow the weight of both legs to rest comfortably on the floor or on whatever physical support they are resting on. Now that we have covered the entire body with mindful awareness, rest the body in this posture, allow it to continue to adjust, to settle down, to be more and more comfortable in this posture. Rest our awareness with the body. Apply mindful observation on all these different bodily sensations. Notice, highlight to yourself their changing nature, their impermanent nature. Alongside the bodily sensations, we probably also notice feelings. Some areas of the body feels comfortable, at ease, full of pleasant sensations. Other parts of the body may feel very uncomfortable, maybe in pain, unpleasant sensations. And also by applying mindful observation, coming back here and now, notice also how these feelings do not stay constant. They intensify, they recede, they disappear, they reappear. True for both pleasant or unpleasant sensations. Coming back here and now, bring mindful attention to body and feelings. Highlight any pleasant sensations you may find within the body at this moment. Allow those pleasant sensations, the feeling of comfort, of ease and relaxation, nice feelings, so to speak. Allow them to come into awareness. And alongside the body and feelings, you may notice at this point of time the activities of our own mind. The most prominent one will most probably be thinking, the rise of thoughts, a lot of which has a tendency to distract our attention, draw attention elsewhere. In the midst of the thinking mind, in the midst of thoughts, other factors influencing our mind may be present. See if we can locate them, if possible. So some of us we may locate restlessness, the inability to stay still, the urge to fidget. Others may identify anxiety or worry. Some of us, due to what we are thinking about, may arise anger or aversion, and still others may give rise to attachment. So coming back to here and now, apply mindfulness or let into your mindful awareness your own body, bodily sensations, the different feelings arise within the meditation, and also the mind, along with the different factors influencing the functioning of the mind, the consciousness. Again and again in our meditation, invite our attention to come back here and now to the present moment. Expand the scope of mindful awareness, welcome into our mindful awareness, bodily sensations, feelings, and all the mental activities. Pay close attention to all of these, investigate, uncover for ourselves their characteristics of impermanence, discover maybe over a period of time their dependency on conditions, and finally maybe you also notice their multiplicity, how they're dependent on multiple parts and not truly a singular entity. Coming back to here and now, apply mindful attention, mindful awareness to the various happening. Be aware of body, feelings, and the mind, as well as the various conditions influencing them. Highlight to ourselves the characteristics of impermanence, of dependency, of being multiple, multiplicity. And now then we can ask the question, is any of these things suitable to be identified as me, as I, or as some possessions of such an I, as mine? Can any of these things be identified as that special soul or self that somehow resists change and is independent and unitary? Okay, that's just an illustration of one method that present within the Buddhist tradition, especially in Theravada Buddhism, rely heavily on developing the skill of mindfulness and quite often also supported by concentration or calm abiding. Because at the moment, what we can observe are pretty coarse phenomena and changes. When mindfulness becomes much stronger and the whole system shift towards much more calm and settled, then we can pick up on more and more subtle changes, more and more subtle phenomena, experiences, and also how this change. If we were to read up on the literature on vipassana, especially in the Theravada tradition, you can sometimes come across the description of the kind of meditative experiences of people who employ such a technique, and sometimes depending on which tradition, there are many different lineage, even within Theravada, different lineage do things differently. Some of them were able to notice very, very subtle changes, which is represented by the mind in different form, can appear to the mind in different form. And in the light of those kind of observation experiences, where you cannot deny how pervasive change is, how impermanent the different experiences arising, coming and going. And so the method itself is quite interesting. It relies on observations, direct observation of experiences, but underlying it, not maybe not in a conscious way or in the subconscious way, a kind of logical process is happening. It is through the accumulation of repeated observation that we find that we come to draw certain conclusion, some logical conclusion, even though the logical reasoning is not explicit, but implicitly we come to certain conclusion. We come to a firm conclusion. Yes, nothing here within one's experience can be permanent, can be resist change. Each and every one of those experiences are necessarily dependent on conditions, are conditional, and each and every one of them are found to be made up of different parts that dependent on the parts. So as those recognitions or those conclusions sinks in, then we might come to have a shift in the perspective. We give up on the old view, the old belief, holding on to some kind of core essence here that I can label as self, as Waichong. And this is the one that is stable, that resists change and permanent. They go from one day to another. This is what then my name, Waichong, ought to be applied to this permanent, stable core, and realize that literally there's no such thing at all. And that manifests in a kind of a breakthrough experience, a profound shift in the perspective. So if you're interested in this method and to find more details, then it's really good to go back to the source materials of that tradition and have a read of those, especially on the different meditative experiences of meditators in this tradition. It's quite informative and eye-opening to see how just by applying different meditation technique with a different kind of approach, how our actual meditative experience can be so radically different. And yet at the same time, when you investigate, you may find that, hey, that is a valid method that I can apply to help me develop special insight. Okay, and just to, if you have any questions, please feel free to type in the live chat. So what exactly are we trying to accomplish with this method, this way? What we hope to get at the end of it? We hope to get at the end of it is the way things appear to us. Now at the moment, our experience appear to us sort of very much surrounding or related to a sense of self. This is my body, this is my feeling, this is my thought, this is my mind. So The experiences can appear to be the possession of a particular self, a particular person here. Or sometimes we might, in certain circumstances, actually identify those experiences as me. That's me. That the body is me. Usually we don't say sometimes we can say that the particular feeling is me. Or quite often, more likely, we identify the mind as me. If asked or what goes from one life, it's my mind. It's the mind. The mind is me. Wherever the mind goes, that's where I am. So we identify with different aspects of our experiences. And this identification, this grasping, is instinctive. It's not something we do consciously. It's something unconscious or subconscious. We grasp onto it. And this grasping, of course, is part of the ignorance. It sort of automatically reorientate everything. The world look to us in a certain way, and therefore we react strongly to anything that threatens the happiness of the self, and we react strongly to anything that we perceive as bringing suffering or pain to the self. And so that's how attachment and aversion derive from ignorance. With when we are able to bring together the favorable conditions to catalyze this shift in our perspective, suddenly we see things with new pairs of eyes differently. We may find that feelings, we stop taking things so personally. We sort of recognize how bodily sensations are the products, at any moment are the product of different conditions. It's not something decided by this sense of self. In fact, there is no such self as a controller to decide. So depending on the conditions of the body or what I've been using the body to do, of course, when I pay close attention, then different sensations arise, correspond to the conditions of that moment. Same for feelings. We recognize that pleasure or pain arise precisely due to their own respective conditions. There is no one control here to decide whether I feel this as pleasant or as unpleasant. Rather, it is the coming together of a whole complex set of conditions that decide whether in this moment a pleasant feeling arises or an unpleasant feeling arises. It's almost like the perspective means we start to see and understand things a bit differently, as dependent on multiple conditions, as changeable, as I said, multiplicity. Another aspect, of course, is the mind. We stop identifying with the mind and consciousness. We stop thinking of the mind as just one single entity. Sometimes we do think of the mind as like a lump of something that is quite stable. And of course, there are some changes we allow for minor changes. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm not happy. But overall, the mind stays the same. And it's an entity that I might identify. Oh, that's me, that's who I am. And now you realize that picture is completely wrong. In fact, there is no entity. There's every moment there is all these conscious experiences arise and disappear, replaced by other. It's like the waves. At the beach, the waves arrive, breaking and recede, and only to follow by yet other waves. So it's almost like our conscious experience are rising, subsiding, arising, subsiding. At no point of time can I catch on to any of those waves and to say, oh, I'm going to preserve this wave. This wave is who I am. In fact, it isn't, because before we know it, it's already past. It's changed. Has given way to new sets of experiences. And that's true for our consciousness, our mind as well. Our mind is not really a fixed thing, an entity. There is no stability to it. In fact, every moment, the moment we open our eyes in the morning, when we woke up, this process starts, this whole series of waves of conscious experiences, one after another, until we fall asleep. We fall into deep sleep. We are sort of unconscious. So that whole series of conscious experiences is what we conventionally label the whole thing as mind. But with close observation, we realize that it's not one thing. Many different things. This time is temporally changing with time. Yeah. So which moment am I going to point to and say, oh, that's me. Oh, that's also me. That's me. And each moments are different. The experiences changes. So how many me can I identify here? And which one is precisely me? Am I the happy moment? Am I the unhappy moment? Am I the sad moment? Am I the bored moment? Am I the indifferent moment? Which one is it? So it radically challenged our current notion of self, and in so doing, hopefully help us to drop some of that, let go of them. We realize that they are unrealistic, they are not in accord with reality, and we start to see things very differently. It's very hard to describe how we see things differently. One way, one possibility is we start to consider things from the point of view of conditions. So instead of saying, "Oh, this is a good person," or "I'm a good person," I sort of say, or very automatically see, under certain conditions, yes, I behave in this way, which you may say good, but also aware that when conditions changes, circumstances changes, other aspects may arise. I might behave badly. So instead of having a fixed idea, I'm a good person or a bad person, I am changeable, and precisely depending on the conditions. And maybe then we become more aware, more mindful, to not only instead of just simply label myself as good or bad, to see how can I influence those conditions, how can I bring together conditions that would encourage and bring forth the better side of me, and also to start to work on other aspects of myself that are not wholesome, not conducive to happiness. So almost like the orientation of the mind, the way we think, has shifted. Yeah. So hence, that's what I call special insights. Okay, so that's all the material I have for this evening. I'm mainly emphasizing one particular method of cultivating special insights, the one most commonly employed in Theravada Buddhist tradition. This is the Buddhism widespread in Southeast Asia, in Sri Lanka, in Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, probably influencing Vietnam. And the next few sessions, then we look at other methods, radically different methods that is employed by other Buddhist tradition to catalyze and bring forth special insight. And I find this way of studying wisdom or special insight very helpful, because it sort of opened my mind up to see that there are different approaches and they are all workable. Maybe they suit different people. Different people are naturally inclined to a particular approach, but the fact that recognizing the different possibilities makes it, for me, quite helpful, because by even trying out the different methods, they bring different kind of experiences, different kind of understanding, and overall, I think I find it quite helpful. Help me to have a grasp on what is this wisdom all about, what is this insight all about, and so it can be quite beneficial to consider different approaches to the development of special insights. So I leave you with that. I wish you have a good week ahead, and hope to see you next week. Same place, same channel. Yeah? And take care, and good night.